Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. I am Joel Erickson. I am joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. Hopefully my voice holds out through the whole thing. It was not good 2 days ago. Kind of got it back into working order for First and Joel on TV today. Hopefully it'll hold out through the podcast. But I don't know. They're 4-6. Weirdly, they lost again. Their third loss in a row. They're still pretty much still in the playoff hunt because the two teams closest to them, the Bengals and the Broncos, both lost too. So technically they're still just a half game or out of the playoff spot or a game out of the playoff spot. Feels worse than that though, right?
I mean, do they look like a playoff team to you? Do they talk in the locker room and at the head coach podium and the quarterback podium like they're a playoff team? No. Today, honestly, I thought summed it up kind of perfectly where the AFC is right now, where there are teams mathematically in the mix, so many teams in the mix. And when those teams that are floundering face each other, that's when they have a chance to score victories and maybe stay in the mix, or maybe eventually someone's going to make the playoffs. When the Colts play a team like the Titans, they have a chance to make it. They'll have some of those teams coming up, Jets this coming week. But when they go up against a team that has the thing that they don't have, which is, well, a couple of things, like very stable culture, recent playoff experience, and that superstar franchise quarterback, it just exposes everything that's leaking here. And that kind of was the biggest takeaway to me is one team. I thought both teams played imperfect today. Both teams had quarterbacks turning the ball over. But one of those teams, both teams, were missing their top outside wide receiver. So it wasn't maybe as suited for the best display of offense from the get-go. But one of these teams had a quarterback who can play around that, make exceptional plays that not only light up the scoreboard, but get like the whole team on board of like, yeah, this is who we are. We can win when we're imperfect. We got a shot. The other one is kind of spinning its tires based on that same position and what it doesn't have figured out there, and how that ultimately is holding back some other parts of the team, like on defense, that I think are pretty good. So I don't know if that's teeing up for our villains of the game or whatnot, but today to me, we just summed up kind of like, there are teams in the mix in the AFC, but there's just a gulf between the ones that have those regular playoff contenders with star quarterbacks like the Bills and the Chiefs and the Ravens, and the teams that wish they had that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't want to step too much on the categories because, again, I don't know for sure that my voice is going to hold out, but outside of the tight ends, their frontline weapons, I think, are kind of fine. Maybe this is my hot take for the day. We don't have a category for this, but I'll just, Pittman's hurt, but I like Pittman if he's healthy. Josh Downs is a good slot receiver. Alec Pierce is pretty much what you want in a downfield threat. Tight end, I can't. I'm not going to defend tight end. Tight end's terrible. They can use an actual tight end who catches the ball, like not just a blocker. They need an actual guy who can catch the ball. But I came away from this game just thinking, like, yeah, they just need a quarterback. And I think the offensive line maybe hasn't been as good as maybe they expected, but it's also super hurt right now. They've got 3 rookies playing. They didn't mean to have that going on. But, just for the season, just going to read off some numbers real quick before we get into the categories. JT has 616 yards in 7 games. Right? He missed 3 games. Is that fair?
Yeah.
He's got 616 yards in 7 games. Clearly on pace for a 1,000-yard season. 4.9 yards per carry. Fine. Downs, 45 catches, 483 yards. Pierce has 516 yards with 7 games to go. Like, I know he had the ball that he couldn't quite pull in today. That was pretty high. I mean, I think it's probably a drop, but 516 yards and 4 touchdowns with what they've had at quarterback is pretty good for a deep threat. 22.4 yards per catch, which I think still leads the NFL. And then A.D. Mitchell looked today like a guy who can contribute. So I don't know. I don't like the tight ends. I don't like Taylor's backups. I wish they had a better backup. I wish they had an actual pass catching back to throw to. No offense to Tyler Goodson, maybe some offense. But they need if they had an actual I don't like their depth more than I don't like their sort of frontline guys. And I can't stand the tight end position. But I really feel like there's enough weapons for a quarterback to get things done. Am I crazy?
No, I mean, you look at the production today. Alec Pierce, 4 catches, 81 yards and a touchdown. Josh Downs, 7 for 72. A.D. Mitchell, 6 for 71. If those are your number 2 wide receiver, 2-3 wide receivers, that should work. It's sort of everything around that, from negative plays to the lack of any support for those from tight ends and running backs. That's kind of where things crater. And it's like, the thing is, the Bills didn't have really anything to throw to today. They had their leading receiver is Mac Hollins. It's not how it's supposed to go. Dalton Kincaid had 2 catches before he got injured. That's their kind of rising star tight end. Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman were both out. So the one team had way more weapons than the other today. But ultimately, I think there's a more important position than that's sort of going to become more of the story of this game. So should we just kick off the categories?
Yeah, let's get into the categories. We will start with villain of the game, as we have for the last 3 weeks, because they've lost 3 games in a row. Nate, we will let you kick off. Who is your villain of the game?
So I've been hinting at it. The villain of the game is the quarterback. Joe Flacco is the villain of the game. We feel like we're going to have a similar theme to previous podcasts with the villains of the game we're going to pick here. It's all kind of the same storylines, but this was another game with the Colts' 3rd game in a row, basically. But they've started Joe Flacco at quarterback. The 3rd Joe Flacco start that he's made in a row where their offense just kind of cratered. So the first 2 were against the Titans and the Vikings. Those were their 2 lowest outputs in yards on the season. So that was more like offense not getting things done. Today, they got the yards, 272 passing yards, and had a 100-yard rush from Jonathan Taylor. It was everything else. It was the disastrous plays. So Joe Flacco finished with essentially 5 turnovers. He threw 3 interceptions. He had a fumble on a strip sack, and then he had the 4th down play where he took a sack on 4th and 2 that essentially counts as a turnover. And I don't know how you can really put it on much more than the quarterback who held it forever and got sacked for a 13-yard loss. In one of those turnovers, the first play of the game was a pick 6. And so when you're first offensive play, so when you're facing Josh Allen, you're not going to match his playmaking, but you have to play a clean game, especially on offense. When your defense is going to give you a chance, which they did again today, like they did in Minnesota, you can't give the game away the way that I thought he just kind of consistently gave the game away. And to be honest with you, I thought there should have been more interceptions than that. All 3 were pretty clear right to defender type picks. He had 2 more dropped in the red zone. One of those, I think, would have been returned to the house. Teron Johnson, who got the first pick 6, he almost got another one when the Colts were in the red zone. He just kind of dropped it, but he had a beat on the ball and could have taken it to the house. So it was about as destructive of a day as you can play from a quarterback, even though, Joe Flacco did finish 26 of 35. He did throw 2 touchdown passes. Yards per attempt ended up at 7.8, but it was all built kind of primarily on garbage time on that final touchdown drive where he threw the touchdown to Alec Pierce to pull it from a 17-point deficit to a 10-point loss. But just kind of everything that went on at that position I thought was problematic. The way that he was handling sacks, took 4 sacks, including that one on 4th down. And it's tough. It's a veteran. They keep preaching that it's about being a veteran quarterback, but it looks too veteran out there. It looks like a pretty old quarterback who I counted only a couple, maybe 3 passes out of the 35 he threw that felt like real downfield passes. One of those, and those usually were the worst passes. One of them was the overthrow that Alec Pierce had to leap up just to get a hand on that tips it back for an interception. So they weren't really – there's really no explosiveness to their passing game at all right now. And, like, you can't mix a lack of explosiveness with destructive turnovers. I think it undermines the whole idea of starting a veteran, this idea of, we're going to go to the stable guy, the operational player who's not going to set us back the way that maybe a young, erratic player would. And he goes out there, he has essentially 5 turnovers. And to be honest with you, the other thing is this is the first time to me I just did not like how Joe handled talking about it after the game. I just thought it was sort of wrote off the turnovers as that's just football stuff that kind of happens out there. He said one was a bad decision. The other were just whatever. That's almost the way that came off to me. I just didn't think he owned that enough. And it was kind of hard to be asking his receivers, what can you do differently on those plays where you watch them and it's pretty clearly just bad throws on most of those. And so Joe's in a tough spot relative to where he should be. I mean, he didn't, he wants to play, but he didn't sign here. So he's like that Marvel villain where he's trying to do the thing he's trying to do what he did last year in Cleveland, which fit a team and help lift it to the playoffs the way that they looked to him and said, that's what we think you can do. I just don't think he has it right now. Physically, he doesn't have the chemistry with these receivers enough to play consistently and avoid turnovers. I don't think he's in a good spot. When they're starting 3 rookies or playing 3 rookies on the offensive line, that has exposed his kind of lack of mobility and lack of sack avoidance and introduced some of the risk of those turnovers, like with the strip sack. So, and also he is, if you look at, I brought up this point a lot, but you look at his success with the Browns, it was heavy throwing to tight ends and running backs. He doesn't have that reliably right now, and I think it's forcing him to exert more in that intermediate range, trying to play patient and with some of these kind of lower percentage or riskier throws across the middle, and that's what led to turnovers today. So you look around this position, I thought the way they played defense, you could probably win with that. At least you have a shot. With special teams, that mostly worked out. There was nothing problematic there. Run game, you had a 100-yard rusher, but they never really had a chance because one of these teams had a superstar quarterback and the other was just not in the same ballpark.
Yeah, I wonder a little bit. I can't remember if we said this in the podcast or not, but I feel like it's worth saying now. Like, I know we've talked about this a couple of times. Like, Joe Flacco obviously is a big name. He's been around the league a long time, but he's not really Phillip Rivers or Matt Ryan. I can't remember if I said that before. Like, those guys were – Matt Ryan won an MVP. Phillip Rivers was kind of like the 5th of the quarterback at the top 5 for like a really long time, despite the fact that he played for the Chargers, who are cursed to never, ever do anything good. Flacco's career is not like that, and his backup career wasn't like that up until last year. I think before last year, his backup career was like he was like 3-14 over 6 years or something like that. And going to him as like the veteran, like looking for the Phillip Rivers thing, he was never Phillip Rivers to begin with. So, I don't know. It's just maybe we did talk about that before. I think it was just unrealistic to expect Flacco to be really, really good. Like what happened with the Browns last year was kind of lightning in a bottle. And on top of that, he did throw 8 interceptions in like 5 games with the Browns. So a 3-interception game plus a fumble, not really out of the ordinary in terms of what he does. Yeah, it was always a little bit dubious trying to think that he was gonna just take it and go and play that kind of football. Which this plays in my villain of the game. We kind of switched here for this week. Shane Steichen. Mostly just that Joe Flacco's playing.
Yeah.
I think we could get into some calls, some timeout, some stuff like that. I just you made the move ostensibly to have the team because he thought he gave him the best chance to win. You've played absolutely terrible offensive football in the last 2 weeks since then. A significant amount of that on the quarterback. Why?
Yeah. They've scored 20 points or fewer in 5 straight games and are averaging 17 points a game in that stretch. Now, some of that, it's a mix of the two quarterbacks, but it wasn't a matter of – it just shows you it's not a matter of the quarterback is what's holding this team back from suddenly being a playoff caliber team. It just –
And why are you – they haven't given us a reason enough to feel like they haven't told us what the reason, what the real reason is, I think, for benching Richardson. I feel like there's got to be more. Because realistically, I think what we've seen the last 2 weeks is that what you lose in the running game, what you lose from an explosive play standpoint, kind of mitigates what you gain in the completion percentage standpoint. And Joe Flacco, there's no future with. I don't know. I'm not saying Richardson's played well. Richardson played bad. He played bad. But at least there was the possibility of a future with him. There's no possibility of a future with Flacco. And situationally, when he's made his biggest mistakes, he throws the pick six. His next 3 turnovers were all in Bills territory. Plus, there's the 4th and 2 sack where he checked into something, couldn't get the ball out of his hands, and took a 10-yard sack. What? That's not what a quarterback is supposed to do. Why is Shane Steichen going with that? Why can't we get a better answer on what's wrong with Anthony Richardson? Why you abandon your developmental plan? If Flacco was playing really good football and they'd won one of these games, then I think you could have maybe more of a discussion about it. But he's not. He's playing terrible football.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing about it was it's the closest explanation we get is that he's a veteran. Shane was asked this tonight, point blank. He said, do you think Joe Flacco gives you the best chance to win? He said, yeah, right now. Why does Joe Flacco give you the best chance? And he said, just his veteran leadership. His second answer on Joe, he said, when he was asked why is he still the guy, he said, just a guy that's a veteran guy. If it's all about being a veteran, you would think that what that would bring is a certain level of, obviously leadership is part of it, but on the field, and a veteran is supposed to bring, safe play, consistent play, not put the team back. All these things that we covered ad nauseum when Matt Ryan was the model, and before I was here, when they went with Phillip Rivers, the idea of kind of bringing a veteran in. When you decide to move to this guy that has this long career, the on-field reasoning is a lot about how he's not going to do too much. He's going to play within the structure. He's going to distribute the ball, and he's not going to kill the team. So, he's got 6 turnovers in 2 games, and really it's 7 turnovers if you count that 4th down play. That is the type of thing that gets a quarterback benched. And that's the type of thing you thought you'd say about a young player. And like you said, Joe Flacco has kind of always done some of this. When he was younger, he would make more plays, so it would kind of even out. But He threw 8 interceptions last year. He's thrown 150. Let's see, now 159 in his career. He threw a pick 6 in a playoff game last year. Like, he is a risk taker, and when he was at his best, it was kind of he'd give some things away and then he'd make some things back. Right now, though, he's lost kind of that playmaking the same way. I don't think he has the same arm strength, and so now we're seeing some of these misses in ball placement and decisions that are just too risky, and that is setting the team back. So when you don't have the veteran side of this on the field in a tangible way, I mean, that's kind of what happened with Matt Ryan, right? Like, that became turnover city because of, it started with the pressure and all that stuff of the offensive line, but his ball security was so bad that you lost the benefit that you thought you were getting. You knew you were sacrificing upside, but you thought you were getting the benefit of leadership, safe play, take care of the ball, lead this team on the field. And we're just not seeing that at all right now. And so I don't know why that continues to be the justification when it's not showing up in the play at all. Like, at some point, all veterans are going to become too old for this game. And so at some point, we've got to see it on the field, or else it's just, this guy used to do something that we liked, and so we're going to keep reaching back for that. And that's kind of how it's felt these past few games.
Hero of the game might be quick tonight. And there's a lot of guys who played well, but I think that it's just the feel around this team is weird. I'm going with Kenny Moore. 7 tackles.
We'll do that too.
7 tackles, an interception, 2 pass breakups. The interception came at a very critical time in the game. The offense didn't do anything with it, but it should have been a critical interception. And also, more importantly, at the end of the game, Kenny Moore was willing to say that he feels like there's issues that need to be addressed, that their effort, the urgency, the way they prepare has not been good. People are making the same mistakes over and over again. It's the first time a player has sort of put words to the general feeling of unease that I think every fan and media member has had around this team since the quarterback switch. He vehemently said it had nothing to do with the quarterback switch. But I also think that Kenny is the sort of leader and captain that, like, he didn't make those comments lightly. This wasn't a guy spouting off. He knew what he was saying, and it probably needed to be said. So I give Moore a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, he had a tweet that followed up on that, and he didn't walk it back at all. He more or less said, if I actually pull up the tweet here, he said, "When we fall short of a win, my emotions are high. As a team captain, it's on me to help right the ship. I believe in our team, and I love battling with these guys." This is, each guy that gets named to captain kind of has to find his way to become that leader. We've seen that in different ways. Michael Pittman Jr., DeForest Buckner, those are the guys that play through everything. So they're little, like, they'll say things that help, of course, but they're also lead by example by, putting your body on the line. Quentin Nelson kind of brings that sort of intensity and attention to detail. You have guys like Zaire Franklin, who are going to be a lot more vocal leaders, the guys kind of giving the speeches. Kenny, I think, is always, we've covered him for a while here. I remember doing a profile, one of my very first stories when I got here in 2021, and it's like he's always kind of tried to find where he fits as leader, as he's not maybe your big speech maker and rah-rah guy in that way, but he's a big time behind the scenes guy. He's the guy that, like, when players are going through things on the defensive side of the ball, they go to him and they talk to him about it. They kind of voice it to him, and he figures out, where do we go from here? How do we settle this? And then this is a next step, I think, for him. This is where you see this with losing teams and teams in disarray, which at this point I've covered across 3 franchises. So I get to see this thing a lot, from the Bears to the Lions to the Colts. It's often this type of player that ends up stepping up and talking out, which is long tenured player, big time player who's currently playing well. So it's not going to, shine poorly on him. And also, he's already been paid. And the reason that all matters is he's ultimately speaking for more than just himself. These are things that I don't think a second-year player can come out and say, or at least have it carry the same weight. Like, it doesn't get the attention of people, leaders of the franchise, the same way if, a special teams player just says it. But when it's like one of your longest tenured guys, the guy that you just signed to the largest contract for a nickel corner in history, and named a team captain, like that voice matters, and you can't brush it aside and act like that's outside noise anymore. They've got to do something about it and address it. And it also, like, when he's the type that has established this for so long that when he says it, it puts people on notice and or gets their attention, I should say. And so I'll kind of pair my hero of the game in. It's mostly Kenny Moore for the same reason, but because this is such a topic, I'm going to throw Zaire Franklin in here as well, just because Zaire. Number one, I thought he made plays like Kenny did. I thought the run defense was leaky early. They stepped up and gave him somewhat of a chance outside of when Allen scrambled late. He had that stop on 4th down, but Zaire Franklin backed what Kenny said when I brought it up to him straight up. He said, like, if Kenny's saying it, that gets my attention. He's the one that said, there's guys on this team that need to learn how to raise their level of play. And he went specifically into, we have a late bye week. Guys banged up. Preparation's not just show up to practice and practice for an hour and be happy with how you practice. That it's the time in the building and the time in the meeting rooms. And it's kind of showcasing that, like, this is a lot bigger than what's been spun a little bit about the quarterback was the one not getting it. And I've always said, like, when you draft a young quarterback, you're drafting him into an environment and you're telling him these are the standards. And until, like, a 22-year-old kid is not going to diagnose all the problems that you don't even see in yourself. So this is guys on the team diagnosing that this is a lot bigger. Preparation issue, time in the building type stuff, focus, all of that is a lot bigger than the guy that the coaching staff tried to push it on 2 weeks ago. They've got issues to solve here. And so I think this is an incredibly interesting time. And I think timing is everything here, because the feel I got out of this locker room is like, they know they can't let this slide anymore. If they lose to the Jets and they go to 4-7, forget talking about the playoffs. It's not out of reach yet, but it's at that point where, like, you either find solutions or some people are going to start finding flights or something like that.
Unsung villain of the game. I apologize. I actually don't know exactly who this is. I think Tony Sperano Jr. is involved. I think Jim Bob Cooter's involved. Whoever is designing the run game. Yes, I know they ran for 114. I know JT ran for 114 yards. But most of that was on 2 runs. And I know the excuse is, well, we don't have Richardson. Anthony pulls people's attention away from the running back. It opens stuff up. No one wants to hear this because everybody hates him so much. Or at least everybody on my timeline tends to hate him so much. But I have seen a coach get Jonathan Taylor and running backs lesser than Jonathan Taylor yards consistently, even when everybody knew they were running it. Twice. In 2021, at the end of the season, Carson Wentz was barely throwing the ball. JT ran for 100 yards every week. And in 2019, by the end of the season, Jacoby Brissett wasn't throwing the ball at all, and they were getting guys like Jonathan Williams 100-yard games back to back. You can find a way to run even when everybody is keying on Taylor. You can. There's a way. Is it harder? Yes. Is it a lot easier if you have Richardson? Yes. But there's a way to do it. And it should not have been that hard against that defense, which was kind of like a boom and bust. They'd stuff them 6 plays in a row and then give up a 59-yard run. It never came in the second half. Find a way to do it. There's got to be something in that defense that allows you to get those big runs and get 114 yards. They got to be better at this. I don't care who the quarterback is.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding has always been sort of that the offensive line coach kind of takes the wheel on designing he designs the blocking scheme, which ultimately is sort of the front engine of that run game. Of course, the offensive coordinator is a part of coming up with the game plan as far as how much to run. Do we want to emphasize perimeter runs, all of that? So they are all lumped into that. I think this is where, like, goes back to your main villain. I thought it ties in quite well because it isn't just that they lose that element that Anthony Richardson brings to make it naturally harder anyway to run, but they built the entire run scheme around having that guy at quarterback. So now they're trying to just plug in a non-mobile quarterback who's supposed to carry that same effect. They have blocks they're counting on from that quarterback that aren't there, and they're emphasizing all kinds of zone blocking scheme, which is what caters to having a mobile quarterback. Is that's part of the zone? Is that's part of how that's how they account for blocks and get guys on double teams and moving up forward when they don't have to man up on a tight end. So I think it's all kind of tied there. It's they got to figure it out though, and I'm gonna pivot. Same kind of idea here, but I will give them a little bit of grace at the fact that for much of that game they were playing with 3 rookies on the offensive line. Now 2 of them they're probably going to have to find a way to play with for quite a while, so they got to figure that out. But I'm going to go with Colts tight ends. I think they tie into this run game. They are here to be blockers, and at least two of the 4, the ones especially they play Mo Alley Cox more than anyone else. If you're going to play these guys who are only here to block, you have got to run the ball well when you have Jonathan Taylor. They're just not getting it done. They're not sealing the edge well enough. Taylor had that one gorgeous run, 58-yard touchdown run off the edge, and I'd have to go back. I'm sure a tight end played well in that, but it can't just be one play. And there were so many plays to the edge today that they didn't even have a chance because they couldn't get any blocks. It was just instant penetration off the edge. And so, these are the same guys that are not offering anything as receivers. You look down on this stat book. So those top 3 receivers all found ways to get 70 yards or more, 4 catches or more. The tight ends, Kylan Granson had 2 catches for 15 yards. Will Mallory, 1 catch for 10 yards. Drew Ogletree, 1 catch for 2 yards. That is just not getting it done. They're not finding middle of the field targets when they get lined up in like a 4th and 2, 3rd and 2. 2 straight weeks we've seen this where they don't have a guy to win a one-on-one tight coverage matchup, which is often either your number 1 wide receiver, where Michael Pittman Jr. has either been healthy or not out there, so that hurts, or it's that's often where tight ends can step up and be that guy, and they just don't have anyone you can even trust to throw to in that kind of a situation if he's covered. It's like these guys have to be schemed open or it's not going to work, and that's where it's like they're not blocking well enough in the run game to get schemed open. So I just think they're really paying for the complete lack of tight ends on a team that wants to run the ball a lot with blocking tight ends and with a quarterback who has lived through tight ends in the passing game to give him some kind of steadiness, and they're just not getting it either way.
Yeah, the tight end group, just the lack of production from them this year. That's why I didn't want to throw that in there with what I said at the beginning. Like, I think you could do it if you just go around the receivers, but they just haven't gotten enough from the tight ends. If Colts fans were hoping that the Lions were going to lay an egg in 2 weeks, they're kind of laying an egg right now in Houston. So no luck there.
It's going to make it harder to catch the Texans in the division.
Yeah, that ship's been gone for a while.
You think so?
That ship was gone when Anthony Richardson tapped his helmet. Unsung hero of the game. Unsung hero of the game. Who do you got?
I'm actually going to go with A.D. Mitchell. Let's give some flowers to A.D. Mitchell here. So he's a rookie. He's going to have some ups and downs. We knew that. We hadn't seen enough of the ups yet. It was so much focus on the downs. Today we saw some rookie stuff where he did have a lower moment when he fumbled on his first catch that he's lucky Josh Downs saved, or that would have been a tough thing on a day of tons of turnovers. But that's the only one of those he had. Is 6 targets today, caught all 6 of them for 71 yards, 11.8 yards per target. And that's the number that's really cool for him. 6 targets, 6 catches, because for like half a season, he was like at he was at recent historical levels of inefficiency as far as targets versus catches. They just couldn't get him to connect. And today they did. He converted a nice first down where it's a kind of Shane Steichen classic on a crosser to the wide side of the field against when they know they got man coverage. They haven't always had the skill sets to do that, but A.D. Mitchell looked like he had a good skill set to do that. They just really needed him to step up with Michael Pittman Jr. out, and he did a nice job. He was not the reason at all that they, I thought there was a world where we talk about, like, there have been past games when they have had to work without Michael Pittman Jr., that they just can't produce at all. I cannot get catches and separation in any place from the perimeter guys. I'm thinking last year in Atlanta, 2 years ago, they went to Jacksonville and got shut out when that was the case. So someone had to step up in a spot that no one's really been able to step up in as a depth player here for years. And A.D. Mitchell did that. So, you hope that's the start of it, because it's not come together so far the way that they hoped with him. His snap count had dropped a lot as a result of that. But now Michael Pittman Jr. is dealing with, he's at a point where he's not playing through the back. We'll see how long that goes. But either way, they're not going to get Michael Pittman Jr. fully over this back thing until, I would think, at least till they get to the bye week. And so A.D. Mitchell is going to be counted on for this team, especially someone had to step up with all we just said about the lack of tight ends. And he did that in a nice way. So shout out to A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah, I talked to A.D. Mitchell. I'll probably write the story either tomorrow during the day or Tuesday. But a lot of it was just Reggie Wayne staying in his ear and saying, hey, stick with it. Kind of the same thing he did for Alec Pierce, honestly, over the course of their time together. Unsung hero of the game. After the way that things are going right now, there's plenty of them. It's just hard to think of them right away because it just feels like everything is going so badly. I don't.
I always feel like I didn't have to do it today, but going forward, when I ever feel like I can't think of one, I'm just going to give it to Grover Stewart.
Grover Stewart had 8 tackles today.
Yeah.
And another sack. DeForest Buckner also had 8 tackles today. I want to give it to somebody on the defense, but like the individual standout piece beyond Kenny Moore, EJ Speed had an interception and 2 passes broken up. Zaire Franklin had a key 4th down breakup. Those guys could all you could throw linebackers in there. I think I'm just gonna go with JT for finding a way to get loose and get 114 yards, even though I don't think the coaching staff's doing a great job. Yeah. Josh Downs and Alec Pierce could fit in this too, but Downs had a drop that could have been a touchdown, and Pierce couldn't quite haul in that. I think it depends on how you define a drop, how that one would go. I would probably call it a drop on the throw from Flacco, but it's definitely an overthrow. I bet like other organizations would not call it a drop. But either way, we'll just go with JT for the big runs he was able to produce, even though they didn't really give him a ton of room to run. That brings us to number of the day. My number of the day is going to be 8. 8 is how many terrible plays Joe Flacco had. 3 interceptions, 4 sacks. Well, I guess technically the fumble is a sack, so that's 7 bad plays. We'll throw in the almost pick 6 to Teron Johnson and give it 8. 8 terrible plays. I want to look for something. Normally with it, I look for something like more off the beaten path. I'll give you a bonus one. 6.2 yards per pass play, which is terrible.
Yep.
But sometimes it just comes down to this is as simple as Joe Flacco's bad.
Yeah. And that's my number is going to play off that. It's 12-23, which is his record as a starter since 2018. Some of those are situational. He's stepped into bad teams as a backup. Also situational in Cleveland when he went 4-1 with a team that was 7-4. But this is a guy for his career, even with that number I just read off, is 19 games above 500. So he did a lot of winning in Baltimore. What changed? Well, this stretch started when he turned 33 years old. Now he's 39. This is a backup quarterback, and that's okay. But they decided to make it something other than a backup quarterback, and that's why it looks this way. They look like they have an older backup quarterback out there playing without tight ends and running backs to throw to, with some rookies on the offensive line, and their wide receiver one's not out there, and they have a weird scheme. So that's why they're
still
scoring.
He's still not throwing down the field either, you know?
Yeah. And that's what's strange about it is like I thought that's where it doesn't square. Just going back to the early discussion with what Shane's laying out here, I thought he was all about explosive plays. And they're costing the chance at it in the run game without that quarterback run threat that could add to JT's explosive runs. Not to mention Anthony was getting some as a runner. But they are not even attempting them in the passing game. So they've just kind of given up the hope of the explosive plays because they're playing with the older backup quarterback who's a pocket quarterback. And it just seems like all of it runs counter to everything they built the offense to be in the first place. And that's why it looks discombobulated.
We're going to see if we can have some fun in this one. Start with game day observation. I got 2 game day observations. We got a bonus game day observation. Number 1, I liked window open with roof closed. Wasn't super warm today. Kind of rainy. You don't really notice it from where we sit, the window, way up high above everybody else. But I'm on the field before the game for First and Joel with CBS and Fox 59. And yeah, I like the window open.
That was cool. It's good.
So that's number 1. Also, number 2, Cole Hawker doing the anvil. Great idea. Like, I'm going to remember that kick he had to win that gold medal for a very, very long time. Like, I've got nothing against former Colts players doing it, but great use of the anvil to have Cole Hawker do it. I almost wish there was some way for him to, like, replicate a kick. I don't know how you would do that with an anvil. Maybe somebody in track would do it better. Maybe he could have run up and jumped. Like, he could have run and jumped and did it like a superhero. That would have made it better.
That would have been very cool. That would have been very different than the traditional way, which is all what we want. My game day observation is that, wow, Bills Mafia travels. And where this really hit me was not today. It was not yesterday. It was Friday. So Friday night, I was out with a friend of the pod. James Boyd and I were out watching some basketball and downtown. And Bills fans were not only out a lot at these places, they were leading like entire restaurants into singing chants about the Buffalo Bills on a Friday night. Like they had taken over downtown Indianapolis. I'm sure Colts fans are like hearing about that. I mean, that's not a fun place to be in. It I do think it kind of sums up a lot of things about where we're at, though, where I don't blame Colts fans for selling their tickets right now when there's Bills fans, or if it's Steelers fans or it's Bears fans, who now that's fallen off, but Lions fans coming up. These fan bases that are excited around what they figured out on offense. They have a playoff contender, and they're willing to pay a lot of money to come travel to your stadium. And like Shane Steichen said today, we're not giving the fans something to get excited about. So I'll tie this into the other game day observation. The boos. The boos were very present. And it started.
That's boo plural, not BOOZE. Nate was not drinking during the game, although he frequently said he wanted to be.
Well, from the fans' perspective, I'm sure there was plenty of boos all around that way, based on what they were watching and how they were reacting, because I noticed it first started that very first it was the pick six, I think, was kind of jarring to people, but then the next 3 and out, or the next time they didn't, I think it was the next possession when they almost threw another pick and then settled for the field goal after Josh Downs dropped the pass. That's when I first heard the boos. And at that point, the boos had this feel of like, come on, guys, don't do this to us again. It was like this apprehension of like, don't just do this once more. It was like a pleading kind of boo. But by late in the game, specifically that fourth down play is probably when it got the loudest. When they went for it on 4th and 2, they didn't, after they didn't hand it off to Jonathan Taylor in either play, they have Joe Flacco just kind of stand there until he gets sacked. That's when the boos were like full-throated, like, I am tired of this. And it was such a message, I thought, of we are absolutely sick and tired of watching the old pocket quarterbacks that we're going to throw out there and sell as hope to the fans in the city, and they do nothing to provide hope that's real. Only for our coach to then later say he gives us the best chance of winning when we haven't seen winning since before the pandemic started. I understood that frustration totally. Like I don't know what they're doing right now on offense and how they, and really the anger I think that's sitting there. It's not just that they're not performing and they're not winning, which always is at the root of it, but it's that they told fans to be patient for like 2 years to see rewards here, to find this long-term quarterback. Just like the Bills told their fans, these same people who traveled here, who had to sit through watching Josh Allen's team go 6-10 his rookie year, as he had the same first 10 games Anthony Richardson did, where they were played. It was terrible passing efficiency and more interceptions than touchdowns, and the team tanked to get him. That was the test of patience. But Bills fans are willing to come take over entire city bars 2 days before a game because they're so excited about the quarterback that they sat through, and now they see it, and he's here and he's scrambling out and chucking the ball 45 yards down the field and scrambling for 30 yards to put the game away. Like, they love that they sat through that and gave patience. And Colts fans offered their patience to this franchise, and they just told them that they were bored with it, and they went back to the quarterback carousel. And I just felt a fan base kind of broken over that today. And so I was kind of happy not and booed.
Yeah, your first game day observation, I think, is a really good one. It's hard for us to tell. It's been hard for us to tell with like the Bears, with the Bills, because there's a lot of blues in those, especially the Bills, because the blues are pretty close to the same color. So it's hard to tell from the press box exactly how much it is, but like, anecdotally, it feels like visiting crowds are invading Lucas Oil this year. I'd be curious to know if fans who are in the stands feel the same way. But like, that's not on the fans; that's on the team for not giving fans something to get excited about. That's the only way I can look at it. So I think that's an underrated storyline of this season so far, is that people just aren't paying attention.
Well, and to follow this conversation, because the boos, we asked so many players and coaches about it. It's kind of the story of this game outside of the ones we keep hammering to make this podcast a little different than the past ones. This is a good side tangent, is that I remember, like, I tweeted out Jonathan Taylor's quote where he was trying to kind of figure out why they're getting booed, and he didn't like when he heard that it was directed at the offense. And I saw a lot of fans tweeting at him, and not that Twitter tells us, certainly it does not tell us everything, but there were a lot of fans telling him, we're not booing you. Like, they love Jonathan Taylor. He had a great game. And they said they're not even necessarily booing the offense, because they were told that the offense may not be humming quite yet. They're booing the franchise that told them, we've found the next quarterback. We're going to develop him come hell or high water. Please be patient with us. Please give us your money. And they're out here watching a 39-year-old quarterback take a sack on 4th and 2 when he can't move. And it's frustration. And it's absolutely warranted. It is on the franchise that, is selling number 5 jerseys and is collecting all kinds of ticket revenue based on essentially a lie. And that's why everyone's as angry as they are. And that's why you're starting to see players speak out about it too. Because the thing is, the players like Kenny Moore and Zaire Franklin, the guys who've spoken out so far, they feel it from the fans more than like the coaches in front office will see it. So, but like their heads in the sand. But like the players are trying to connect with these people. They do moments, events out in the community. They sign jerseys. Like, they live off, especially defensive players, live off the energy of the crowd. So when they're being booed, and not only that, but I noticed Bills players were hyping up the crowd on 3rd down plays because there's so many Bills fans in there. That hurts players, man. No one wants to go from being loved to being either forgotten or hated. And so I did notice a lot of fans tweeting at the players trying to tell them, like, hey, we haven't lost love with some of you cornerstone players. We're just tired of the franchise putting us through this time and again.
Now for one that will be very much more difficult for me than for you. 3 football things that gave me joy. 3 football things that left Nate terribly vexed. I got to be honest. I'm really, really tempted. I've never done this before, and I'm not going to do it now. But honorable mention for me is going to be that Josh Allen scramble and throw at the end of the first half. Because, man, listen, I know this is a Colts podcast. I know you guys didn't like it, but it is fun to watch that dude.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It is fun to watch a guy do something like that. It's just fun.
Yeah, that's what I'm writing about is Josh Allen. But, I mean, it is fun to watch him, and it's just a good contrast of where they're at as a franchise. But that scramble and throw, I guess I can kick this off. One of the things that left me terribly vexed. This is cheating a little bit because this is also a joyful thing, but it's just fun. It's just interesting, funny is that throw to Mac Hollins for 45 yards. Josh Allen said after the game to reporters that they were nervous it wasn't going to work because Mac Hollins was trying to locate the ball because the roof is open and he's trying to track the ball through when it crosses over with the sun. And like he found it at like the last second and caught it.
The roof wasn't open today, though. The roof was closed.
Or is it just the? Oh, I'm messing this up. I should have pulled out his actual quote here. Sorry, he said, was the window open?
The window was open, but it's on the other side. A little confusing.
Well, he said the sun shined through the windows. Mac Hollins said he could barely find.
So maybe it's coming. Maybe it's coming in from the other side.
Yeah,
the window doesn't open.
The window being open brought a lot of sunlight in that had to vex. It's just sort of like one of these things where I kind of butchered this whole thing, but basically, I don't know, that fits the day, and maybe I can get a job at the Colts here soon. Basically, I'm vexed at the fact that like the opposing players are going to find out the morning of the game whether a window or a roof are open and have to adjust to those elements, which is a good home field advantage, I will say. If you can just keep mixing it up, the Colts should do that. Right now, it's one of the best things they've got going for them. So it's a vexing thing on the opponent, though, to deal with that.
Football thing that gave me joy. It didn't turn into an actual fumble, but Ronnie Harrison hitting the Bills return man so hard the ball went squirting out and shooting across the field. I like the possibility of kickoff return fumbles, even if they don't get recovered by the defense. It's like the ultimate momentum change of thing play because you've just given up a score, you get the ball back and you cough it right back up. And Ronnie Harrison, knowing that he had a huge play, even though it didn't get recovered, is a football thing that gave me joy. I couldn't tell. I will say this: I couldn't tell how they decide. People watching on TV at home didn't seem to be too mad. I couldn't tell like why they decided to give it to the Bills dude.
Well, that's going to be my other football thing that left me terribly vexed is how we have a situation where we have a pile for a fumble and it takes like 10 minutes to clear it. I mean, like at some point, I know it's like they think whoever's going to come out with it at the very end can then it's just like all this is fighting for the ball and whoever ultimately wins that battle is going to get it. That's not how it's actually officiated. Maybe it's how it should be, but that's not how it is. It's
I vote for that. I vote for whoever comes out with it wins.
See, that would be entertaining in moments, but that's where I think some of this would take like 30 minutes. Some of these guys are never giving that up. So we got to end this at some point. So that's kind of why they're like, the funny thing is that like eventually the Lions came out with it, or the Colts came out with it and ran down in the end zone with it. And it's like, nope, all that effort did not ultimately get you possession because, at some point they saw a Bills player grab the ball when they decided to look, and that was the rule. So that was a large gathering and a large amount of time to ultimately change nothing from what happened the play before.
Number 2 football thing that gave me joy. Joy might be too strong a word because I don't generally have a problem with players celebrating after any touchdowns in the NFL because they're so hard to get. And I didn't have a problem with Alec Pierce celebrating by doing a Lambeau leap since he grew up a Packers fan and always wanted to do it. But Pierce catching the touchdown with like 2 seconds left or whatever it was and not celebrating at all. I kind of enjoy Alex sort of. He doesn't have a signature celebration. He doesn't have for him, it really is about the situation. And like I said, if someone celebrates, I'm not usually mad at him. I just thought, you know what? I respect that. I respect that he didn't do anything with the ball after catching what's actually his 4th touchdown catch of the year.
Kind of thought that moment was sort of telling of everything going on today, because he catches that touchdown. He doesn't celebrate because it's sort of like this isn't really a time for celebration. But the franchise did. They shot off fireworks, and about, I don't know, 100 fans were left to enjoy those fireworks who were Colts fans. So that was interesting. Last football thing that left me terribly vexed is when you are taking a timeout to help out a guy like Josh Allen. That's what Shane Steichen was trying to do at the end of the first half. It didn't count as a timeout because they went to the replay assist and ruled that the player was out of bounds. But just very strange, because there were 33 seconds left.
33 seconds, yeah.
The Bills were at their own 19-yard line, but it was like a second down. So if this worked out in the Colts' favor and they stopped 2 straight passes, and then the Bills punt, they're getting the ball with, what, at best 20 seconds left?
Yeah.
On their own side of the field, again in an offense that has zero explosiveness in the passing game. So I just didn't know what the payoff to any of that was, which is unfortunately popped up too much with this team this year. Like when they're backed up deep in their end zone at the end of the first half in Houston, I didn't know what the ultimate payoff was versus the risk of what happened there. And there was risk there of, you're going to give Josh Allen more time. Again, he got it anyway because of the replay assist, but you were going to give him a timeout. Who knows? The Bills may have realized that they're on 19. They just we're going to run it out or not be as dialed in on the timeout at that moment. But you're trying to help out a guy who can scramble out and launch the ball like he did 44 yards on a rope to Mac Hollins that put the Bills right in field goal range. So just one play, you give him an extra play, you can take one play to go 45 yards and get a field goal range to kick a field goal. And that moved it from a 4-point deficit to a 7-point deficit. Like that, I don't know. That's happened too much this season of aggressiveness for the sake of aggressiveness, and it ends up getting points for the opponent.
Yeah, I generally support trying to get as many points as possible, especially when you have the ball coming out at halftime. Not when you're going to get the ball back for 20 seconds. Nope. Don't think that makes any sense. So my last football thing that gave me joy, Grover Stewart got another 0-yard sack today. He smiled as big as you can possibly get. When that man gets a sack, he is so happy. He's so happy. And he's gotten, I think, 12.5 now in his career, which is not a bad number. It's not a crazy good number. Like I think his line mate there, DeForest Buckner, has like 65. But yeah, Grover Stewart's sheer joy whenever he gets a sack is very enjoyable for me. If you get a chance to go back and watch him talk about his play against Minnesota last week from our Zoom on Monday after the game last week, really, really good stuff.
Yeah, and we asked DeForest Buckner about it a few days later, and I asked what's his reaction when he does that, and he said every time it's the same. He just laughs. It's like you have this giant human being who is making a ferocious play, and in the moment, all he has to do is laugh, that's Grover. He is finding joy in the heat of the pain, which is a good metaphor. And
Grover to me is actually like the spirit of 3 football things that gave me joy, because Grover actually plays with a ton of joy. Like he really loves the game. And he says funny things like, I threw the guy out the club, or I'm just trying to choke some guys out or whatever. And it sounds very menacing when it's written out and stuff like that. But like it's always delivered with a big smile. Like that guy really loves football. He's like, if I had to choose somebody on the team for like the epitome of football things that gave me joy, it's Grover Stewart.
Yeah, that's Grover all the way. He's it is not how every defensive lineman is. So he's cut a little cut a little different, built different, as they say.
Okay, that brings us to too much blame, too little blame. Nate, who is going to get too much blame for today's loss?
Well, too much blame in a big picture way is Anthony Richardson. I think has gotten too much blame from the Colts. He's not the problem with the offense. In fact, I don't see how you can argue that they're better without him. At very least, he can offer some explosive plays, and he has really helped their run game go. They've been able to run. They ran the ball pretty consistently well with Trey Sermon and Tyler Goodson for a game when he had to start against the Dolphins. So I think a lot has been put on him as when it's been framed as we need a veteran, we need the leadership. If we get Joe Flacco in there, our leadership will be good, our culture will be good, our offense will be good. All that stuff looks like it's worse now than it was before the change. So this is a little different how we normally do this, but I think the Colts in general are having to realize that they threw a little too much blame on a young quarterback for kind of offensive-wide and organizational-wide problems that you can't just put on the kid you drafted into this spot.
I'm not ready to go there just because his accuracy was such a problem, but I understand what you're saying. Too much blame for me, maybe the whole defense. I know they ended up giving up 23 points, but they did pick off Josh Allen twice, which is exactly as many times as he was picked off in the first 9 games entirely. They stopped. They held them to field goals on 3 other drives. Listen, this defense is not going to be. Who's the number 1 defense right now? The number 1 defense in the NFL by yards. Tennessee. Don't like that.
Odd.
Very strange. That's very strange. The Chargers is number 1 in points. Pittsburgh's number 2. They're not going to be that kind of defense. They're not going to be a hold you to 270 yards, 280 yards defense. That is a problem. That's a significant problem. You would like them to be better than that. But they're largely doing the job based on what they are over the last couple of weeks. And I know people still hate watching them play because they give up a lot of yards. And you'd rather they didn't give up the yards. But for what they have at the corner positions, I just think they've done pretty well.
Yeah, it's another game where they gave the team a chance. And, I mean, if you could have told me today that they would hold Josh Allen to 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and less than 300 yards passing, feels like you should be able to win with that. It's not perfect. It's not going to be for the reasons you laid out, but like they did things on Josh that normally teams can't. Got 2 sacks, even though it was for 0 yards. So those are sort of just stuffed run plays. But the 2 interceptions and then holding him out of the end zone as a passer, I thought was key. I mean, they lost him late on a couple of big scrambles that got him to 50 yards rushing. So overall on the day, they didn't handle that. But I think, like, for the most part, the Bills' production came on that long gutting drive at the end when I just think, like, the defense is on the field so much. They don't have a real lane to win this game with how their offense is playing. Like, that happens a lot where they just break your will in this league. So that, for the most part, they held him in it.
Yeah, so he'd only been sacked 11 times in 9 games before this, which is 1.2 sacks per game. So them getting 2 sacks, regardless of how they got them, that's almost doubling that too. They just, like I said, they're not the Steelers. They're not a team that's just going to completely suffocate a team. But they're giving the offense chances that the offense is then throwing on the ground and looking at disdainfully because they don't want to score points. That might be a little over the top, but oh well. Too little blame. Nate, who's getting too little blame for today's game?
Oh, I am unsure. Because I feel like
I'm going to go offensive line.
Okay, you go for it.
I'm going to go offensive line. I know they've got the rookies in there. Some of Flacco's pressure was on him. Well, I think was on him holding the ball too long, just to be honest. But they're not outside of a couple of big bursts. Didn't really open a ton for JT in the running game. Gave up some pressures. It's not necessarily fair because, there's 3 rookies on it. But, just in terms of how the game went, if you're looking for somebody on the offense that maybe didn't play that well and deserves to get mentioned here, it's probably the offensive line.
Yeah, that's a good one. They were dealing with, losing Bernard Ryman in the mid-game is tough, but it happens in this league, and they've just not had a good stretch here. It's the offensive line offense in general has plummeted. The offensive line has been a big part of that. So I can second that one. I think oddly I'm going to go with Cam Turner because he is the Colts coach, and every week we put the villain of the game on Shane Steichen, and he's certainly earned a lot of that. We put the quarterback out there, whether either one it's been, they have earned that on the field. But there's someone tasked with coaching and developing these guys, both on game day, but also behind the scenes. That's kind of everything they've pinned this franchise on since they drafted Anthony Richardson. And when both quarterbacks are consistently struggling, and sometimes for the same reasons, the turnovers have been way too high. They have not been able to handle pressure, whether that's Anthony Richardson reading the blitz, knowing it's coming, whether that's Joe Flacco reacting to it when the pressure does come. It's kind of some consistent issues there. We're seeing that it's not a matter of like one player was just a lot better than the other. That one player is letting this whole thing down. Maybe they're both bad players, but I don't know. They are supposed to figure this out. You either figure out good quarterback play when you have the number 4 pick, and you get to pick your chosen backup as a veteran, or you're maybe not cut out for it. And right now, I just don't know that Cam Turner is getting that done. We got to talk to him last Friday. A lot of people kind of were reacting to his comments because it kind of fit in with Shane Steichen, if not more extreme, on the end of no real answers to any of this. Couldn't figure out. I had a story out with the headline of nobody will say what Anthony Richardson needs to work on in practice. That's kind of Cam Turner's job, is to figure that out. Anthony himself said, I'm not necessarily sure what one thing I should focus on. I'm just trying to do everything at once, which does not sound like a plan of action. As I laid out in that story, none of these guys, whether it's Cam Turner, Shane Steichen, Jim Bob Cooter, have ever developed a quarterback from a backup into a starter. So they've got to come up with this plan on the fly. And just every question you kind of ask Cam about how they were going to do that, I felt like we didn't get any kind of answer or plan on it. And then so when both quarterbacks are then struggling when they step into the games, I think a little bit more spotlight needs to go on kind of people tasked day to day with making this happen. And it falls at Shane Steichen's feet a lot because he's very hands-on with that. He runs the offense. He's the front man for this. But there's other people involved in that too, and I think Cam deserves a mention here as well.
That's an interesting point. I'm going to bring this up real quick while I'm thinking about it. Tony Sperano, we were asking about his plan for developing guys, and he says what he does is he usually gives them like one thing to work on for a while until they mastered it, and then they move on to the next one. And he was saying he thinks that's really his developmental philosophy, no matter what age they are, whether or not they're a rookie or whether or not they're Quentin Nelson. It's just like he thinks, if I tell you, okay, you're going to do this rep, I want you to do these 9 things differently, that you're not going to get any of them. Whereas he thinks real growth happens when you say, okay, today we're going to work on hand placement. And until you get the hand placement, we're going to be working on hand placement. And then you'll move on to the next thing when you have a chance to move on to the next thing. I thought that was interesting, and it's interesting that they're kind of saying that Richardson feels like they're kind of saying the opposite to him.
Yeah, and it's also, Joe Flacco's really drove this home, that you don't get any reps at all in practice as the backup. This week they asked Anthony Richardson to mimic Josh Allen to help the defense out. So if he's going to spend his practice reps living someone else's life and trying to basically play a backyard style of Josh Allen that isn't going to work on the stuff that fundamentally he really needs to work on, then you need to really come up with a good plan to do that. And I asked them, he doesn't have game film right now to break down. So do you go back to the earlier games? Do you watch them again? Do you drill in on them more now that you have time with him not as a starter? And they said, not really. You just watch Joe's stuff and you hope he learns. It just very much has a feel of like, good luck, kid. I hope you absorb this and figure it out. And that to me is not good development.
That brings us to the last two categories, the ones that are meant to be a little bit more big picture, one to throw away and one to go on. One to throw away, what's one thing we're talking about now that we'll be throwing away as we get going in the future? I'm going to be honest. I've been thinking about this for a little bit. I'm having trouble coming up with one to throw away here. Maybe the offensive line. Maybe that's my throwaway.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, like Gonzalez is playing his second half of a game. Ryman will probably be back soon. Bortolini is probably better than Ryan Kelly, or right with Ryan Kelly at this point. I think the offensive line will probably, in the long run, be okay. I'll go with that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna say if there were still hopes that this team with Joe Flacco at quarterback had real aspirations of making the playoffs and doing something in the playoffs,
throw that away.
That I throw that way. I just think we've seen enough evidence. So 3 straight games, 3 straight starts now for Joe Flacco, from Tennessee to Minnesota to Buffalo. The 3 since he got to face the winless Jaguars, who are the worst secondary. In those 3 games, 2 of them were their lowest yards in a game all season. And the other one was today when they had 4 turnovers. So that's a lot. That's a large sample. That's three games. That's that's almost a month of watching it play out this way, and with consistently the same issues of not a lot of run game, not a lot of consistent run game with this style of quarterback, with no ability to evade pressure and sacks when they do come into the pocket, with no lack. The main thing is no explosiveness. And if you don't present explosiveness as an offense, you're ultimately not a playoff contender. It's really hard to look at any offense that you feel like can go win a playoff game, or we can wait till the playoffs get here and see any ones that do and say they weren't able to get any explosive big time plays out of their offense. I think today was a real good summation. That's like, even if maybe there's a way where they can get into the playoffs still somehow doing this, where they just survive these low scoring games against teams like the Jets and Patriots and Broncos and Jaguars and Titans and Giants. Someone's going to have to get in from the AFC. So it's not impossible that they make it, but the reward for that is going to be going on the road to face a team like the Bills or a team like the Ravens. And if they're in it for a quarter, it may be a big surprise. It just feels like they don't have an offense that threatens. And if that's what you are, you ultimately are not a contender. Because for the AFC, ever since Patrick Mahomes entered it and Josh Allen became Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson arrived, like Joe Burrow got in here, like you win these games by being that high level offense, that really explosive one that can go on the road and put up points in these cold weather environments, which we haven't even seen that element of this yet. So I just think we have to, if they want to stick with Joe Flacco, we got to get away from the idea that like this guy raises the ceiling, that this team has a high ceiling with this style of play. I think that's got to go.
That brings us to the last category, one to go on, something we're talking about today that we're going to be talking about the rest of the season. I'm going to take the easy thing here. Who's starting at quarterback? Like, it is actually more normal, I think, than maybe Colts fans realize, to constantly be asking whether or not someone is starting the next game. It's still fairly rare. There's a lot of beats in the NFL where they're not doing this after every game and going, hey, like the first question today basically was, why is Joe Flacco still starting? I think we're going to be doing this the rest of the season, even if they put Richardson back in, honestly. Because not that long ago, there was a bunch of people saying, get Richardson out of there. Flacco's the best option. So I kind of think that they've set it up now. What they've done now is that if they go back to Anthony Richardson, if he has a bad game, we're going to have to ask again. So this is just where we are.
Yeah. I'm going to say, because of that, to build on that truth you just laid out, I'm going to say one to go on is going to be frustration by players and fans over this position. We are kind of in a little too deep here. It's 10 games into the year, and the one certainty we've gotten about this position is that there is no plan and there is no solution. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be a way for one of these guys to start playing well or have a good game or maybe a couple good games. I don't think it's going to win people over this season, where all of a sudden, fans are over any apprehension that the players fully are back on board believing this franchise has every answer. So I think we're going to continue to see certain comments about the culture from players. I think we're going to continue to hear boos. The next home game this team has is against the Lions. So it's a scenario where even if they play pretty well on offense, like, it may not be getting the winning that was suddenly promised to move for Joe Flacco. And at this point, they're set up to whichever lane they go to now or stick with now. It's going to look kind of weird back on the leaders of the franchise. If they go right back to Anthony Richardson, it's admitting that it didn't work with Joe Flacco, that it wasn't about winning, and you got to throw that plan in the trash. While they lost 2 games in the interim. If they stick with it, it will, I think right now, very much look like they're just kind of doubling down and don't want to admit a mistake yet. So they're going to play a guy that is 39 and is not getting it done and doesn't have a future here. The one route that would change this is if they go back to Anthony Richardson and he just plays so great that maybe by the time we have these late games in the season, this team is rolling and they've kind of moved on from some of this midseason weirdness. That would be really fun for everybody if that happens. I think betting on that is really hard right now, because what you just laid out, when you go back to Anthony Richardson, he now is in this mindset of like, if I make a mistake, they may pull me. He hasn't been getting starter reps. So there's not really been a plan to develop him in this process. So I don't know how much better he can really be when he gets out there as far as accuracy and ball control and all that kind of stuff. He's been watching this offense struggle so much for a couple weeks. So I'm sure he learned some things not to do, but I don't know that he learned this is how you do it and solve it and be great out there. So I think we're just kind of stuck in a lot of this tone right now. They've kind of dug a hole here that I don't think they can get out of in a week. It's going to take either a pretty miraculous switch over the course of a season where everything comes together, or what's probably more likely going to take is getting into the offseason and finding some way to move on.
They're theoretically still in the playoff race, but our podcasts are getting darker and darker at the end. And just to get as dark as possible, next week the Colts play the Jets, who honestly the Jets are a bigger dumpster fire than the Colts.
I was going to say it's a good chance at a win. Maybe it doesn't have to be dark.
Yeah, the Jets are a dumpster fire. They're 3-7.
That's the problem with it, is that unless you blow the Jets out, I don't know that you can win a game against them and feel like, we're suddenly really good. Like it's going to take a little bit more than that. But maybe, I don't know, maybe they fix some problems and they blow them out. The Jets, I mean, that just happened to the Cardinals, but they need something's got to. There's got to be some kind of positive momentum they can find here, because it's been a stretch for these Colts fans. I feel for you guys.
The good news is it will not happen in prime time. Which normally I think the fans and those of us who cover the team are probably in a little bit of a disagreement about it. And honestly, listen, we get to cover the NFL. we don't get a choice. If you want to watch your game in prime time with nachos or a burger or whatever you guys get at night, totally on board with that. I do think that in this situation, based on what the Colts have put out there the last 2 games, most Colts fans are probably in alignment with us. The only reason we don't want to be in prime time is that I like to sleep. So that's it. It's a very selfish reason. I'll admit it. But I think we're in alignment on this one. They flexed it out. It is a 1:00 game now. No one has to go to bed without the chance to think about something else between whatever happens in the game and the game itself.
That's right. You can finish the game by 4 and still try to have your Sunday. That's the silver lining.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
That's it.
Move on and forget everything.
That's it for the Colts Cover-2 podcast. We'll have a lot more coming up in the next couple days. Kenny Moore and Julian Blackman and Zaire Franklin's comments opened a little bit of a box for us that we've got to kind of unpack here. There'll probably be more questions about quarterback. Lots of stuff to keep in mind. Keep your dial tuned to IndyStar.com.